What am I got? Shows my batteries are almost dead. Okay. Well, I'll let you deal with that.
I'm the tech guy.
Okay. So we keep going through our lesson. The second lesson is titled in our book, Before Abraham Was. It is a takeoff on a statement that Jesus made. Jesus was being questioned about the things he was doing and the way that he was teaching and the authority of his teaching. And he made some comments about, that Abraham was looking forward to his day. In other words, the day that Christ would come. And they said, how can you say such a thing? You're not even 50 years old. And Jesus makes the statement that is quoted in our book, and that is, before Abraham was, I am. Now, we could spend all evening talking about just that statement, but I want to make a couple quick observations about it. Before Abraham was is a past tense, isn't it? And then Jesus says, I am. He didn't say I was, or I'm going to be, but I am. The thing about the statement there was that Jesus was before Abraham, Jesus was during Abraham, and Jesus has been in the interim, and Jesus still is. And so I am is a continuous state of being. And so that's where that significance is. And it's one of the passages that help show us about the deity of Jesus Christ. Well, anyway, this section of chapters 1 through 11 is what literally takes place in the Bible before Abraham. Abraham is introduced to us in chapter 12. So, the things that we are looking at tonight are basically the events that take place before the time that Abraham comes on the scene. And he has listed in our book 5 stories that are during this time. The first one is the creation. That the creation takes place in Genesis chapter 1. Genesis goes through the creation, tells what those things are. One of the things I really like about our book is the charts that are there. If you go to page 13 in the book, you have a chart that lists the things that are made on each day. There at the top of the page, you've got night and day. Light was the first thing that he created. And then right below that you have day 2, in which you have the expanse, or the firmament, as it's called in the King James, and which means the oceans, the atmosphere, the sky, the heavens, if you will, those things. Day 3 is when the earth and the land and the seas and the plants and the trees are made. And then day 4 is the heavenly bodies that we would call them, the sun, the moon, the stars. It doesn't say that specifically, but I think you could also surmise the other planets and moons, and the solar system is what he makes on day 4. Day 5, the things that live in the expanse of the sky and the sea, which are the birds and the fish. And then on day 6, there were the earth dwellers, the things that would be living upon the land, the animals as we know them. And then also he created Adam on the 6th day and Eve. And so I think that's a really good thing. That's a good chart to look at, a good way to remember that. One of the things he does is he links the things that are there, like the light and the things that dwell in the light, as far as in the night sky or in the daytime, are days 1 and 4. Days 2 and 5 is the ocean and the atmosphere, and 5 is the things that go in that atmosphere. Day 3 is the earth and the land and seas and plants. The earth dwellers are the things that lived on the land. Now, I want to make a comment real quick. There's a very common thing in some religious circles, and that is the term theistic evolution. Anybody ever hear theistic evolution? Theistic evolution is the belief that God created the pile, if you will, and then allowed the pile to evolve. Well, and also there is the view that God created and that these days aren't literal days, that there's a large section of time in some of these days. Well, both of those things don't really fit with the text, for one, because he talks about a day being an evening and a morning and then the next day. And number two, when you look at the things that were made, the logical order that they're made in, something like, say, for instance, on day 3, the plants are made on the dry land. Plants require sunshine in order to live. The sun was created on the very next day. So the lag time is long. But if there are millions of years between day 3 and 4, there aren't any plants around. The same as also day 5, you have the fish and birds, and then day 6, you have the animals. Plants are very, very dependent upon animals and birds and insects to, 1, pollinate, and 2, to spread their seed. And if there are no pollinators around to pollinate the flowers, or in some other plants to spread them through the birds dropping the seeds or through their manure or whatever, then the plants aren't going to exist long without the insects. One of the scares that people have today is because the honeybees they're losing a lot of honeybees in our world. And that's a big concern, because roughly a third of the plants on our planet require honeybees or some kind of pollinator in order for them to produce. So I'm not going to say hug a honeybee, but be kind to honeybees. Now those hornets, you can step on them all you want, but honeybees, be kind to them, because they are very, very important to our planet. But I say all that to say, I fully believe that the days of creation are 6 literal days. God created, God said it, they came, it happened in the days that those things took place. Because if there aren't real days, then the things that were created on earlier days, just quite bluntly, are not going to make it. Especially the plants are not going to last if the sun doesn't come on soon, and the birds and the insects that need to come about on the later days. So anyway, so that's the story number 1. A couple things. There's another chart that is very good, and if you want to look at it a little further for your study, it's that chart on the bottom of page 12, and I think there's some good things there. There's some good sermon material or whatever, study material about the comments that God made about the creation. The things that God said, if you'll notice, all 6 of the days, God said, let there be, or let thee. In other words, God spoke and it happened. I've seen a bumper sticker before that says, I believe in the Big Bang Theory. God said it, and bang, it happened. I like that. But anyway, God said, let it be, and it happened. On all the days but day 5, it says, and it was so. All the days but day 2, it said, God commented and said that it was good. And then God called, and meaning the day and the things there, he called it. So he named it and made the proclamation of it. But then also he mentions that there was evening, and there was morning, and then there was, and it lists the 6 days. And after the 6th day, after he created everything, it not only says that God said it was good, but he said it was very good. And so all those things are proclamations there. and important points about that. Any comments or questions on creation, chapter 1? Yes, Tom?
Do you think certain things were made in their entirety to begin with? For example, coal.
Coal?
Yeah, you think God placed coal here or not?
Well, you spent your life dealing with coal.
Well, I'll tell you why I asked you.
Okay?
You go with the most recognized, what I call theory on this. They said for every 1 foot thickness in a coal seam, it took 10,000 years for the compaction method.
Right.
Well, my student came up to me one day afterwards. He said, "You don't believe that, do you?" I said, "I don't believe that at all." So I said, "I just told you that. That was all,
Right. Yeah.
I personally feel God put that here in its entirety.
Well, I believe that the earth was created to look mature and be mature. For one thing, for God to create everything the way that it is, there has to be some resemblance or some manner of maturity. All the creatures were created mature, created in an adult stage, and certainly the earth needs to be. Now we know that dead plant matter and dead animal matter can hit the ground, decay, and make more dirt. But if the earth was just a rock and there was none of that already present, then nothing would ever grow. And so there had to be some soil that God created that was fertile enough in order for the plants to grow out of. Because if there was nothing there, I do believe that some of the things that were created, like some coal and some other things, were created there as being present there. I mean, if you can say, "Let there be light," and there's light, and if you can say, "Let the earth appear," putting a little bit of coal in the ground is not a big deal. As far as the power that's behind that. Also, there are things that that quite honestly don't take nearly as long as they say they do. I mean, I've seen a couple times some petrified trees that are supposed to take thousands and thousands of years. They have dug up lots and lots of petrified trees that they know were directly, because everybody saw it. Everybody that's my age and a little older remember seeing Mount St. Helens blow and all that mud and stuff come down. Well, they have dug out many hundreds of petrified trees that carbon date thousands of years old in the wreckage, so to speak, of Mount St. Helens. And everybody saw it on TV happen. They knew those were standing trees. And what was that, the early 80s, wasn't it? It was like 81 or something like that. We know that aren't that old. What was it? 80? Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I believe that God created some things older, and I think some things take less time than what we kind of think. Also, those that are my age and a little bit older, remember that all the oil is going to be gone out of the ground pretty soon. Some of my earliest memories are sitting in gas lines. You remember gas lines? Yeah, don't ever want to go there again. You can only go to get gas every other day, and you can only get 5 gallons and this and that. Some of my early memories are sitting in the hot sun down here in Fairmont, sitting and waiting in a gas line, in the early 70s. And so, why? Because all that oil's gone. We got more oil now than we ever had. And all those wells that were supposed to run dry down in Texas, they ain't running dry. There may be one here and there that does, but for the most part, the oil and gas is coming in the ground so fast. I think they're kind of wrong on how long a lot of that stuff takes. But anyway, we move along. In chapters 2 through 4, the beginning of 4, oh, I'm sorry, Dan?
What light and dark was it talking about in verse 3 versus verse 14?
In chapter 3, verse 14?
No, verse 3 versus 14. What's the difference between? Because they both mention light and dark.
Okay. In verse 3, that was day 1 when God said, "Let there be light." Now, what the light was in verse 3 is a good question, because it is a light that God created that God brought into presence. And day 14, the lights that he put in the sky are clearly the lights that we see. The sun, the moon, the stars, those kind of things that are out there as lights that are in the expanse of the heavens. But as far as what made up, other than saying the light in verse 3 was from God's source, that God spoke into existence, it's a good question. I mean, I really don't know as far as that goes.
Because in verse 3 is talking about how the evening and the morning, the one day.
Mm-hmm.
But is that our day? Because our sun and moon wasn't until
And if there is any place that you got to have that question, it's got to be in that first couple days. But then the thing is what's being accomplished. Nothing else is on the planet other than just the light. And then day 2, he creates the firmament, which is the earth and the sky. And because day 3, the plants and the the plants and trees come on the place, and it's the rest of the stuff's got to come real quick from then. So as far as what is the light, I don't know. It just says God said, "Let there be light." As far as the light that we can see and know and understand, that's the stuff that came on day 4. But God set aside the day, I guess you could say. If anything, really, the creation in day 1 would be the day, or the concept of a day, of a night and a day.
could he have been talking about the day for him, though?
Could be, yeah.
Because then that would be.
It could be a day for him, and certainly, if there is any wiggle room as far as the time frame goes, it's in those first couple days. Because, literally, when you get to that 3rd day and you're introducing plants and trees, they're going to need the sun and they're going to need the insects 2 days later. And it's got to be, it's got to be pretty quick. And so, yeah, theoretically, you could certainly have just simply the light. You could have the firmament, and they could go on indefinitely. But if you consistently understand that days 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all literal days, then it makes sense that days 1 and 2 also be days as well. Because really there's nothing going on. I mean, God says there's light, and then God created the earth, and then day 3 the land appears, and it's all running then, because the plants and the trees and all the rest of it comes along. So, yeah. Okay, let's go over to chapter 2. In chapter 2, verse 4 through 4:2, you have Adam and Eve are created. What you have is, in chapter 1, you have all of creation. And then what you have in chapter 2 is, essentially, God goes back and explains further what was covered in regard especially to man and woman. The author in the book talks about it being a style of Near Eastern writing, and it is true. You notice that sometimes in some of the other